This last year has been pretty crazy, but one of the things that has been keeping me sane has been Dungeons and Dragons. Not only did I meet my first friend group and make my first official character, but I've also made some great friends and had some questionable experiences, and some sad ones, and some amazing, unforgettable ones. D&D has a lot to offer, and after playing in 4 separate homebrew campaigns with 5 characters under my belt, I have a lot of stories to share. About a year's worth. So buckle up, hold on to your popcorn and dice, and don't confuse the two, because this is about to get wild. I met my first DM and first co-player at a D&D club at our local university. At first, I wasn't sure what I was getting myself into. The DM seemed cool and was excited to show me some of the lore and world of a homebrew campaign he was working on, but mentioned he was somewhat new to DMing. The co-player was excited, already brainstorming a character he had in mind. I decided to give it a shot. After all, I was new to D&D too, so I figured we could learn together. Little did I know that it would actually be one of the best decisions I made in university, and would lead to some pretty great friendships. So, I took my chances and rolled the dice. Quite literally, because soon after a brief session 0, my first character was born. I wanted to play a cleric, but also be on the front lines in combat, and so I settled on Wayland Berkhardt, a human cleric war domain. I'll preface this so I don't completely shock you. Wayland was based on multiple characters, Garp and Whitebeard from One Piece, White Fang from Naruto, and the voice specifically came from Grunkle Stan from Gravity Falls, which sounds something kind of like this.
You call that Ben Franklin? He looks like a woman!
Like most first characters, probably, Wayland is a little rough around the edges, but I'll let him introduce himself. 20 years in the Blackwater prison, worst penitentiary in all of Dalrays, does make a guy a little rough around the edges. I was imprisoned after ordering my men to retreat and fleeing myself from an invading orc army. To stand and fight would have been plain suicide. But desertion is taken pretty seriously by the order, and I was sentenced to life imprisonment. At the time, my wife Kaya was late in her pregnancy and gave birth to our daughter while I sat behind bars. Kaya died during childbirth, and my bastard brother-in-law took my daughter. During my first and last visitation, he spat in my face and told me he would let me rot behind bars, that I would never lay eyes on my girl. Where he went, I wish I knew. I gave up in prison multiple times, even questioned my faith. But Cahorn, the champion of valor, offered me the strength to survive. He never gave up on me. Now that I am free, I wander Dalrays, looking to finally meet my daughter, learn her name, apologize, and tell her what really put me behind bars. I thought it was better to live and fight another day, and wouldn't you know it, another day has finally dawned. There were 4 other players at that first session, including the DM, and I saw the shocked expressions when I first spoke as Wayland. It was a little embarrassing, but the DM also did voices for characters, so it felt a little less awkward. In that campaign, we sought out champion relics, essentially god artifacts, and fought against the threat of a goblin king and his growing army. Along the way, we met a kingdom of talking beavers, saved and mentored a fey woman named Charity, nearly got TPK'd by an adult black dragon, nearly got TPK'd by a vampire lord named Soren Daskow, and eventually met the champion of valor himself, Cahorn, and brought him with us to wage war against the goblins and evil goblin king Jerry. Just for your reference, champions in this universe are essentially gods. In physicality, they're kind of more like god avatars. They're extremely powerful. Wayland's best friend in the party was a wood elf valor bard named Cleam Castellan. Cleam was a town guard who moved up the ranks in the order. He was scarred by the death of his wife, an orc woman whom he loved very much, and as far as the party is aware, he tragically outlived her. Often Clem wondered what the point of his life was, as everything in the world seemed to repeat itself and eventually end in death. Wayland shared that the world needed storytellers, so that the heroes of the past could be remembered, and their mistakes would not be repeated by future generations. In turn, Clem taught Wayland how to talk and approach Zybel, Wayland's daughter-in-law, a woman who hated Wayland, also interestingly enough, a tiefling woman. You didn't hear that wrong. Don't worry, I was just as surprised as you probably are about that. Wayland and Clem didn't always see eye to eye, but essentially being the two dads of the party, they would often look after the rest and ask each other questions or advice. Wayland has yet to find his daughter, but news of her being imprisoned at Blackwater Prison has him traveling back there in hopes to rescue her and finally meet her. If you're interested in the specifics of a campaign, I can go into more detail, but a short summary seems appropriate for this video. My second character was actually for an evil campaign I was invited to, same DM and campaign setting, but different characters and players. This time I played a Changeling Chronurgist wizard who took the persona of a red tiefling merchant called Alastor. That might be a bit to wrap your brain and tongue around. His real name was Kairo, but Alastor was the name everyone, including the players, ended up calling him. Alastor will now introduce himself. Hello friends, how do you do? I am Alastor, an invention of a cantankerous order scientist named Steel Snakebark. I took an interest in Snakebark's personal tomes as he was foolishly training me to impersonate and assassinate a high-ranking order wizard. I was always fascinated by the mechanics of time magic and manipulation. Historical pieces on famine always made me smile, but for real pleasure, I would indulge myself with lavish tales of devils and their trickery. See, I devised a way to create and conduct a soul contract whereby I grant 3 wishes for my client's soul. I was proud of my invention. I showed it to Snakebark. He laughed at me and asked for his coffee, his paper, and for me to shut the hell up. Being a good businessman, I did as Snakebark wished, and so added my first soul to my collection. Afterwards, a strange horse began following me around, a nosy, famished thing, but I digress. You have been good company, so I must ask, what is it you desire? In this campaign, the evil PCs are essentially the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, representing war, death, pestilence, and famine. Alastor was the horseman of famine, complete with a gaunt-looking horse to summon at will. Alastor's character was based roughly on Gaunter O'Dim from The Witcher 3, and he was meant to be lawful evil, but as the campaign wore on, Alastor gradually turned to alcohol and became more and more chaotic and erratic. However, early in the campaign, while conducting business with the Resident Thieves Guild, Alastor met a young woman looking for her father. Desperate and seemingly on the run, she was willing to cut a deal with Alastor and unwittingly offered her soul if Alastor would reunite her with her father. Her father's name? You may have guessed it, Wayland Berkhardt. Alastor is yet to meet Wayland, but when that time does arrive, it will be quite the showdown. In this campaign, 2 players often didn't make the sessions, so Alastor and his blood hunter companion Ulrich played the buddy cop duo and hunted down a terrorist organization called the Children of Cain. The Children of Cain burnt down an orphanage that Ulrich supported financially, as despite being an evil bastard, Ulrich actually had a soft spot for the well-being of children. The duo investigated a series of fires across the city of Southport, tracking down the arsonist responsible, a member of the Children of Cain, blowing open his front door and brutally murdering him in broad daylight. It was a bit of a call to war, as you can imagine, and later Alastor and Ulrich would battle the remaining Children of Cain. They were powerful undead enemies. Alastor killed one, but he took a powerful fireball and burned to death. Ulrich slew the remaining foes and discovered for the first time that Alastor was not the tiefling merchant he claimed to be, as upon death the true form of a changeling is revealed. However, previously Ulrich had shown Alastor he was a werewolf, an Order of the Lycan blood hunter. Ulrich's reasons for saving Alastor are unknown. Perhaps he didn't want to lose a friend, a useful tool, or somebody who shared his problem of hiding their true selves from the world. Regardless, he had Alastor revived, and the two would have many more adventures, meeting new horsemen, demon lords, and taking down a monarchy, piece by bloody piece. My third character is from a separate game universe with a different DM. Her name is Jorie Turrim. She hails from Caldenor, and probably has the most developed personality of any of my characters so far, which is a little ironic considering she's a barbarian. I don't know what you mean by that, pretty boy, but if that's supposed to be an insult, I'm not afraid to reconstruct your face. Yeah, and it's just Jorie. Growing up in a dwarven household is bloody hard, especially when you ain't good at the traditional skills. You know, the 3 M's, metalwork, masonry, and mining. And yeah, my father is Marl Turrim, the leader of a renowned family, and chief in relations between the Lightbringers Church and the Dwarven Empire. And I am a true middle child of 8, always missing praise and recognition, yet always catching blame and punishment. When I was a tot, it was always my siblings who would receive gifts and boons, even the younger ones, and to this day, even now, that I'm recognized as an inquisitor for the Lightbringers Church, I'm still left with scorn and admonishments. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After unsuccessfully learning any dwarven craft, I was sent to the monastery. After bending a 3rd candelabra over some mouth breather's head, the nuns gave up on me and sent me to the kitchens. It was here I was able to take out my anger and energy and use it for something good. I taught myself how to cook, and I served as the chief taste tester for the monastery. It was here I saved the life of my future master, Inquisitor Carmela Guerra, whose dish had been dreadfully poisoned. Stuff kept me down for weeks, and that's with my dwarven resistance. Guerra says he saw some potential in me and took me in as his apprentice. Together we repelled the dragon-worshipping Drankarn along the coast, and having returned to the holy city of Solvatan, I am ready to embark as a full-fledged inquisitor, crack some skulls with my axe, and make them heretics pay. In this campaign, the PCs are agents of an inquisition, rooting out any forbidden magic and worship. They follow the Lightbringer and the Lightbringer's Church, which is a parallel to Christianity, where its followers are monotheistic and outlaw all other gods and religious practice, as well as certain schools of magic, like necromancy. Jorie, joined by her companions Grayson Black, Enrico Navarro, and Larissa, investigated mysterious suicides and poisonings happening across Solvatan. After a horrific incident where cult members publicly flagellated themselves, proclaiming and proselytizing the return of the Angel of Rebirth, Jorie and her friends were thrust into a bloody adventure. Together they worked to quell riots and hunt the cult down. However, Solvatan was only plunged deeper into chaos, and the cult grew bolder, summoning demons and constructing totems to their heretical god, even infiltrating the Lightbringer's Church itself by impersonating clergy members. Conflict among Jorie's fellow Inquisitors also came to a head, just as the Angel cult were completing their final ritual. See, Jorie had been harboring a heavy secret, that her childhood friend and fellow Inquisitor, Grayson Black, whenever he was badly injured, would go into a seemingly cannibalistic rage and bite his enemies, sucking their blood like a vampire. It was an infrequent occurrence, and despite Jorie's desperate efforts, Grayson was unaware he would enter this vampiric state. While fighting a particularly nasty group of devils and cultists, Grayson began to turn, and ran down a fleeing cultist, drinking deeply of her blood. Party member Enrico Navarro, an Inquisitor as well as an intensely devout follower of the Lightbringer, was horrified and disturbed by Grayson's display of savagery, and the two men nearly killed each other, but Jorie and Larissa called them off, pleading that saving Solvatan from destruction was of greater importance. This argument was not without severe consequences that would not only last onward into the coming battle, but also the rest of the campaign. In the moment, it caused a schism, splitting the party and leaving Jorie and Enrico to attempt to stop the final ritual by themselves. Jorie would go on to save Enrico's life, as the head priest of the Angel of Rebirth cult shattered Enrico's mind by literally throwing him through hell. It was a desperate situation, but thankfully Grayson and Larissa returned just as Jorie was fleeing with Enrico, and upon regrouping, the Inquisitors turned their weapons toward the freshly summoned Angel of Rebirth and her devil followers. A large-scale battle was waged as rioting cult members clashed with the Inquisition. Ultimately, the Angel of Rebirth was dispatched by Enrico, but the price of her defeat, the discovery of Grayson's secret, would work to turn the party against themselves. Would the Inquisitors ever rekindle their comradeship, or would death be the only solution? My newest and final character is from Nifel, a counterpart country to Dalrace. Like Wayland and Alastor, Flint Shiratori, my Wildfire Druid, shares the same DM. The country of Nifel strays from traditional D&D and more into homebrew, far more than any campaign I've played so far, as you shall see. Hi? Speaking of homebrew, I might have a friend who knows a guy who knows a guy who has a batch of the good shit cooking if you're interested and got the cash. You just wanted my name. I'm Flint. Flint Shiratori. I'm a Basan descendant, essentially. I'm kind of like a human chicken monster, but it's okay because I live where there's a whole country of weird monster people, so I don't stick out that much. Except I usually do. I was raised in the Petalwinds, a very beautiful wooded area with great big lakes. My people, the Basan, very delicately groom and care for the forest and our shrines. You can imagine, when I burned things down, they weren't very happy with me. It's not really my fault. I was defending our village from real monsters, and my wildfire spirit might have gotten a little bit out of hand. Just between you and me, the forest needed to burn anyway. How are new trees supposed to grow if the old ones are always blocking the light? Flint is a homebrew race called Basan Descendant, a race based on the mythological Basan in Japanese folklore. In this campaign, the PCs and the country of Nifel proper are inhabited by the descendants of a mythological creatures and classical monsters, if not the creatures and monsters of myth themselves. These creatures have managed to pull together a well-functioning society and have technology comparable to about the late 1800s IRL. If it helps, it's kind of like The Wolf Among Us, but with any creature you can dream of. Currently, Flint finds himself as a student at Crimson Cross Academy, along with fellow students Fluff, Loka, Hale, Ilithia, and Aisha. The main conflict has been derived from a massive school civil war, with future king and son of Dracula, Arthur, on one side, and the other son of Dracula, Alucard, on the other. Flint, being a chaotic neutral, proceeded to play both sides, poking into Alucard and Arthur's cliques, and trading secrets. During this time, Flint was attempting to set up a drug and alcohol operation behind the school in the woods, and was gifted a crystal that was supposed to expedite the process. A gift from Patrick, son of Cthulhu and Team Alucard. Later, Flint discovered his product had been poisoned and used to harm people, also harming through circumstance his close friends and party members. Flint burnt his entire drug operation down, destroying weeks' worth of progress, and swore to get even with Patrick, whom he assumes is responsible. As of a year, those are my characters and their stories. Jorie and Flint have accomplished much since, and a new character, a phantom rogue, has emerged in the evil campaign called Griswold, but those adventures can be told at a later date. I've learned a lot during my time playing D&D, and I've made some pretty great friends. After a year, I would say my roleplay has certainly improved, and I am able to think and speak like my current character confidently and more often. I'm not as shy about what I want to do, although sometimes it does get a little bit awkward. I've learned to ask quieter players questions, bug their characters, and include them in conversations, and I've also learned not to take things so seriously. Role-playing out a critical fail and coming up with a hilarious reason for failing is usually just as fun as succeeding. My goal as a player is to have fun and to help other players and my DM also have fun as well. Perfect roleplay be damned. Also, what I've really enjoyed is the shared story that emerges from a game of D&D. D&D is like watching a story being written right in front of you, where you have a piece that you get to make your own, and everybody participating puts their pieces together. It is certainly an experience like no other, and although there have been rough sessions, my overall experience has been fantastic. That's all I have to say about my first year D&D. I hope you liked the video and learned something. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments.